MG has thoroughly revised its budget-priced family hatch, the MG6, and the result is a far more credible car. As before, it's very spacious and surprisingly good to drive. Now though, there's also better cabin quality, more technology and equipment, a reasonably frugal diesel engine, and much lower pricing. In short, this car's upped its game across the board.
The MG6, it's a car that ought to have everything going for it. A famous badge, a super low price tag, a high specification, and an interior more spacious than virtually all of its rivals. It's even put together in Britain. So why is it such a rare sight on our roads? And will this improved version make this model a more familiar player in the Focus-sized family hatchback segment? Perhaps. There are, after all, plenty of people in this country wanting the MG brand to succeed. The marque has, after all, always held a special place in the heart of British drivers. Founded by Cecil Kimber way back in 1924, Morris Garages, or MG, was the brand that our dads aspired to. A Ferrari they would probably never own, but a sports car wearing that famous octagonal badge was ever tantalisingly within their reach. But that was in the 50s, 60s and 70s, before the equity of that famous name was diluted, first by Leyland and then by Rover, who ultimately used it as little more than a sporty trim level for their ordinary cars. What was needed was something designed as a proper MG from the ground up. A family car perhaps, but a resolutely sporting one, designed and built in Britain. A car maybe like the MG6. Back in 2011, the original version of this model was the first mainstream product launched by the MG brand's New Era owners, SAIC, the Chinese Shanghai Automotive Industrial Corporation. The conglomerate always promised that the old MG Rover Longbridge production lines would run again. And sure enough, with that original MG6 they did, even if the Birmingham workers were only bolting together kits imported from China. The car in question was actually based on a model SAIC had developed for the Chinese market and sold there, badged as the Roe 550. But it was turned into something more MG-like, thanks to the efforts of a group of ex-Rover British engineers who tweaked the chassis to suit newly added MG branding. With decent quality and really affordable pricing, that recipe might have created a car to significantly trouble some of the smaller brands in the Focus segment. As it was, MG Motor UK found that build quality standards that the Chinese market had been quite happy with were simply not acceptable to British buyers. Or at least they weren't at the kind of prices being asked. Time for a rethink, and one that has brought us the much improved MG6 model that we're going to look at here. Launched in the spring of 2015, it delivered higher quality, extra technology and, most importantly, much lower pricing. All matched with super-sized standards of space and a surprisingly pokey 150 PS 1.9 litre diesel power plant. Here then is the car that we should have had from the start. Let's put it to the test. So, what is it like to drive? Well, climb in and I have to say politely that classic British heritage isn't the first impression that springs to mind. But then, why should it be? MG Motor UK Limited Owners SAIC will bring us a purpose-designed sports car in due course that will hopefully have elements of that. This, in the meantime, is, according to the original brochure at least, apparently a sports fastback. In real language, a sportily trimmed Focus or Astrotype family hatch. There's nothing wrong with that. Scroll back through history and you'll find that MG didn't only make roadsters, but also sporty family cars, like the Magnette models of the 50s and the 60s. Those old models sold to family people who want a little extra spice in their morning commute. Exactly the customers the modern owners of this brand hope will be interested here. So let's see, shall we? You push the key into the dash, pause appropriately to remember brand history as a "Since 1924" branded slogan pops up in the infotainment screen towards the middle of the fascia, and then slip the car into gear. You're ready. Sure enough, the feel on the move is quite sporty. It helps now that the only engine on offer a 1.9-litre DTI Tech diesel, is very pokey by class standards, offering the kind of 150 PS output that only the very priciest rival Focus class diesel models can deliver. As a result, 60 miles an hour is just 8.4 seconds away from rest. Annoyingly though, for those who might be autobahn bound, MG still continues to limit top speed to 120 miles an hour to keep insurance costs down. There's a useful 350 Newton meters torque output too, so you won't have to row the car along with a gear lever in urban driving situations. What especially marked the original version of this model out though was not so much how quick it went, but its impressive ride and handling balance. So much of this car is basically Chinese in origin, but the drive dynamics that are responsible for that strong showing are very firmly British, tuned by a team in Longbridge that includes many of the same people who used to develop performance-orientated MG Rovers. They took the unremarkable original Chinese version of this car and then transformed it with revised spring and damper settings, new anti-roll bars and faster steering. The result is a model that really suits our country's terrible tarmac without pandering to it. Yes, there are suppler riding cars in this class and more sportily suspended ones, but when all's said and done, there are actually few models of this kind that we can think of able to achieve a better combination of both over good roads and bad. And when a car works this well, you feel confident in pushing it along a bit, especially given the fact that body roll is well controlled, there's reasonable feel through the steering, and there's decent change action too from a manual gearbox that now features 6 speeds. Drive like that and you'll get the benefit of the major dynamic change that sets this improved MG6 apart from its predecessor, an electronic differential that the engineers have christened the E-Diff. This works in conjunction with the stability control system to regulate wheel spin through the corners, giving extra safety and greater driving involvement. As a result of all of this, there's certainly substance to the marketing claim that this improved MG6 model is just as much of a driver's car as the original version was. Are there still other issues though? Well, a few. If you stall the car, there's the irritation that it can't be restarted unless you select neutral. And talking of gearboxes, given that a high percentage of the buyers of the previous version of this car were retired, you would have thought that an automatic transmission option would have been offered this time around. Then there's the fact that the Longbridge development team still don't seem to have had their remit extended to do anything much about refinement. As a result, cabin noise levels remain higher than you'd expect from a car of this class. To be fair though, the diesel thrum settles down a bit once you get into a cruise. And once you do, take a look around. There's heated leather seats and sat-nav on most models, all for not much more than Super Mini money. With that in mind, a bit of a throaty engine note seems quite a small price to pay. By European standards, the styling of this MG6 isn't hugely arresting, but from the notoriously conservative Chinese market, where it must sell in huge numbers, it's a very dynamic looking car indeed. A wide track and flared wheel arches, enough to set Oriental hearts aflutter. In China, this car's sold as a Roe 550. The MG brand doesn't mean very much there. Here though, it's everything in getting people to take notice of this model. Hence the bold MG branded nose highlighting a high-waisted look that's fresh and current, with tapering front lights and an angular black grille adding nice finishing touches. The aesthetic changes made to this improved MG6 certainly keep it up to date, although you would need to know the original version of this car quite well to spot them. The front grille around that big MG octagon badge up front is chrome trimmed on this top model and has been subtly restyled, as has a lower air intake that's now flanked by trendy LED daytime running lights. The headlights are smarter too, and on a top model like this one can now incorporate piercing bi-xenon beams that turn with the road. Move to the side and the profile is dominated by this sharp upper crease running alongside a lower window line that's chrome trimmed on most models. A subtler swage line lower down gives the flanks some shape, linking the 16-inch contour design alloy wheels that all MG6s must have. We also like these chromed side vents. Who cares if they don't actually cool anything? More important though than the look and the shape of this car is its size. A At 4.65 metres long, it sits midway between a 4.4 metre Focus-sized C-segment family hatchback and a 4.8 metre Mondeo-sized medium-range D-segment model. In other words, this car's much bigger than you'd expect it to be, given its Fiesta-style entry-level price. Which is, of course, something you particularly notice when it comes to boot space, or at least the boot space you can use once you've got your stuff inside. One of the issues with the original version of this model was the high loading lip and the narrow boot opening on offer once you raised this steeply raked rear hatch. Though with this revised model, this rear bump has been reprofiled for a smarter look, no attempt really has been made to solve that problem. So when you raise the hatch, there's still quite a high sill over which you have to hump your belongings. Still, once you do get everything in, the news is mostly all good. The 498 litre boot capacity is huge, beaten only in this class by the standard version of Skoda's Rapide, and massively better than most of the usual choices in the family hatchback C segment. To be specific, you're talking of a boot here that's 30% bigger than a Volkswagen Golf and fully 60% bigger than that of a Ford Focus. It's also worth pointing out that a trunk of this size gives you nearly all the capacity you'd get from one of those supposedly larger D-segment models I was just talking about. Say something like a Vauxhall Insignia, a car with only 32 litres more of extra luggage capacity. This MG's advantage over its rivals continues when you push forward the 60-40 split folding rear bench, this action freeing up a 1,379 litre total. Are there issues? Yeah, a few. The flat and complete cargo area isn't completely flat, and the trimming in the boot does leave a bit to be desired. The carpet's still stuck down with Velcro. On the plus side though, MG has listened to customer feedback and added a useful 12-volt socket across the range. Time to take a look in the back seat, an area of the car with space you might suspect to have been compromised by all that extra boot capacity. As it turns out though, there's once again significantly more room than you'd find in a Focus or a Golf, with plenty of head, leg and shoulder room. To the point in fact where on shorter journeys, 3 adults could sit together quite easily, assuming that the middle person could find some way to position themselves comfortably astride this rather prominent transmission tunnel. It was the at-the-wheel experience though that we were keenest to sample in this car. In the original model, after all, this was the area that rather let the MG6 down, with a budget brand feel to the choice of plastics used and a frustrating set of rather fiddly steering wheel controls. Fortunately, this time around things are much improved, although what hasn't been delivered here was the thorough redesign that was really needed. Within the limits of what was possible with this facelift, real steps forward have been taken. True, this interior still isn't quite as well finished and put together as that of a comparable Focus or Astra would be, but MG has certainly narrowed the quality gap to those kind of cars. The plastic key you push into a start-stop slot on the dash still feels cheap, but not much else really now does. Soft touch plastics now feature on top of the fascia, even if they're still noticeable by their absence the further down you look. And metallic inserts around the air vents and in areas like around these lower centre console ventilation controls lift the previously unremitting gloom of the somberly trimmed cabin. It's down here, in fact, that you'll notice one of this revised MG6 model's other key changes, the installation of an electronic handbrake switch. This isn't normally a feature we're particularly keen on, but here it has allowed for extra storage space and a much cleaner looking design. Perhaps the most important cabin improvement lies at the top of the dash with this MG Touch infotainment system, a standard fit item provided you avoid entry-level trim. This bank of middle dash switches here control a 7-inch colour touchscreen mounted higher up to the left of the instrument binnacle. Included is all functionality you'd expect, so there's access here to a DAB radio and the usual stereo functions, plus Bluetooth with media streaming, the option of playing video files, and a mirror link feature that allows you to replicate your mobile phone handset's home screen on the display and operate that phone via the MG Touch system. The setup also includes app-based functionality too, a good example of which is the included iGo navigation by NNG sat-nav system. This includes European mapping, 3D landmarks, reality junction views, enhanced signpost information, speed limit advisories, and the option of 6 or 7-digit postcode entry. As for the practicalities, well, they're better than you might expect too. A few irritations remain, like the thick metalwork either side of the front and rear windows that can obscure your view out. The trip computer screen in the centre of the instrument binnacle is the smallest that we've ever seen, and the steering wheel mounted rotary dials that operate it are fiddly to use, although the system does include a lap timer, a rather amusing touch given that this is primarily a budget-minded family car. Otherwise, though, there's not much to criticise. The big plush seats are now not only more smartly trimmed, but are also heated on all models. There's plenty of adjustability too, as there is for the big 4-spoke MG branded wheel, which features leather trim and multifunction buttons on most variants, and through which you view a redesigned silver-trimmed instrument binnacle, complete with what the brand calls a tunnel style of gauge presentation. It's not the clearest layout that we've ever seen, but the red needle dials with their silver bezels add a sporty touch that fits with the dynamic feel of this car. There's nothing complicated about the MG6 range. One 5-door body style, 3 plumply specified levels of trim, and a single 1.9 litre diesel engine option, with drive via a single 6-speed manual gearbox. Prices start at just £14,000, and the very most you can pay is £18,000. It couldn't be simpler. Which is just as well, perhaps, as this car's market positioning couldn't be more unusual. Back in 2011, the original version of this model was launched with a value proposition suggesting that for the price of an ordinary Focus-sized hatch, you could get more equipment and Mondeo-sized standards of space. It wasn't enough. People still didn't want to pay £16,000 to £20,000 for an unknown quantity, even with the discounts that MG dealers were prepared to give. Especially when the finished product felt, well, a bit cheap inside. So this time round, the Chinese brand has shifted up a gear. The MG6 is still exceptionally spacious and well equipped, but the no-haggle fixed prices now start down at Super Mini levels, while quality standards have risen to meet buyer expectations. MG really is determined that you should take this car seriously. Stack it up against its competition and you may well do. MG is still clear on what that is: Focus and Astra-sized C-segment family hatchbacks. Yes, despite an entry-level asking price that somehow undercuts the cheapest little 5-door diesel Ford Fiesta you can buy, and luggage space comparable to something like a big D-segment Vauxhall Insignia. Even once you understand that, there is still more to get your head around. After all, the engine on offer here isn't just any old diesel, but one with 150 PS. The kind of output that you'd only get from, say, a Focus, an Astra or a Golf-size model if you bought a very expensive one priced in the £20,000 to £23,000 bracket. Even really feebly powered diesel models in this segment are going to cost you £3,000 to £4,000 more than this MG, although of course the difference would be greater than that if you were to match the specification to include everything that this car throws in as standard. So you've got the idea then. It's a lot of car for the money. In concept, the nearest thing we can think of to an MG6 is the original standard version of Skoda's Rapide, another value-branded C-segment car with the space to rival a D-segment model. A comparable version of one of those, though, would still cost you around £4,000 more and would give you less equipment and a great deal less performance than is on offer here. Time to check out that specification in a little more detail, at which point more surprises are in store. Forget vehicle size, what other £14,000 car of any price includes, as standard, heated seats and 16-inch alloy wheels, along with things like electronic air conditioning and a 6-speaker stereo? On the base S model, MG6 buyers can also expect to find LED daytime running lamps, all-round electric windows, USB and aux-in connectivity, and hill hold control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. For all this, it's likely that entry-level MG6 S models will be a rare sight on our roads, the brand expecting that almost all buyers of this car will want to upgrade themselves to one of the plusher variants, the majority likely to opt for the mid-range TS model. You can see why. For an MG6 TS looks a decent package. This variant's $2,000 or so premium over the base version, buying you nearly all the niceties that you probably thought you couldn't afford on a car of this kind. The key addition lies in the inclusion of something the brand is very proud of, its MG Touch infotainment system. This includes a DAB tuner, a media player and iGo satellite navigation. Plus there's Bluetooth phone connectivity along with a clever mirror link function which allows you to duplicate your mobile handset's home screen onto the MG Touch system's 7-inch colour dash display. Other key TS model features include auto headlamps and wipers, rear parking sensors, cruise control, a leather-trimmed multifunction steering wheel and also seats part-trimmed in man-made leather. With a car costing this little though, you might also want to check out what top-of-the-range spec will give you. And that's what we've got here, this flagship TL variant's £4,000 premium over the entry-level model, justified by the inclusion of virtually all the items you'd find on the options list of a comparable B-segment rival. That means full leather trim, power-operated seats, dual-zone climate control, a rear parking camera and bi-xenon headlamps that turn with the bends to better light your way at night. There's also a unique chrome-trimmed front grille to set this top version apart. As for options, well, as I mentioned earlier, there's no chance of getting an automatic gearbox in this car, which given its high age demographic could well be an oversight on MG's part. Less of an issue is the fact that the accessory range is much more limited than it is with the brand's more fashion-conscious little MG3 model. MG reckons that everything you'll need is included in one of the standard variants, including adequate safety provision. Don't go looking for any of the latest electronic features which are now offered elsewhere in this segment, but at least the basics are present and correct. These include the curtain airbags that were missing from the original version of this car, plus the usual twin front and side bags, along with the expected electronic braking and stability features to hopefully ensure that you never have to use them. Steps forward have certainly been taken here. Rewind the clock back to the original launch of this car in 2011. All that was on offer then was a single 1.8 litre petrol engine that struggled to better 35 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and which put out a smoky 184 grams per kilometre of CO2. This time around there's still just one engine option, but it's a much more appropriate one. This car is powered by an improved version of the 1.9 litre DTI Tech diesel unit that was introduced halfway through the production run of the original MG6 model. And it's nearly twice as economical and 40% cleaner than that old petrol 1.8, managing 61.4 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 119 grams per kilometre of CO2. Of course, we need some perspective here. The truth is that in today's family hatchback segment, those returns are nothing to write home about. In developing this car, the MG engineers didn't have access to the kind of high-tech efficiency technology used by more expensive rivals, and as a result, this car still isn't going to interest too many company buyers. But so what? This model isn't aimed at business folk. Instead, rather refreshingly, it's targeted at private buyers. These are people who MG hopes will be prepared to look at the bigger picture and the way that they'll be able to offset any running cost shortfall by what they'll save in the affordable upfront asking price. Bear in mind too that you're getting a lot more power here than a typical diesel family hatch would normally offer. Compare against equivalent 2-litre diesel models in this segment and you'll find that this MG6 is only 5 to 6 miles per gallon and 10 to 12 grams per kilometre of CO2 away from a truly class competitive showing. That isn't a bad result so early on in this Chinese brand's history, and it's certainly aided by the 75 kilogram weight saving that the development team have been able to make with this improved model. You'll certainly get a decent travelling range from the 13.6 gallon tank. Expect up to 835 miles between fill-ups. What else? Well, servicing is every year or 15,000 miles, whichever comes first, and there's the usual 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty, although only a year of roadside assistance cover. Insurance is rated at Group 17E. We really like the concept behind the MG brand, that of taking nearly a century of heritage and blending it with the might of the world's fastest growing manufacturing nation. SAIC, MG's parent company, does after all annually build almost 6 million cars. It's a combination that in the future will doubtless bring us better models than this MG6, but even as it stands, it's clear from this improved design that lessons are quickly being learnt. Yes, refinement could be better. The running costs need tweaking, and there's still a bit more work to be done on cabin quality if MG is to keep pace with the class leaders. These, though, are faults we could see many potential buyers now being quite willing to forgive in return for such an affordable value proposition. Here, after all, we're being offered a car that's bigger and better equipped than a typical C-segment sized Focus Star model at a price the same or less than you pay for a much feebler diesel-powered B-segment sized VW Polo style Super Midi. That's quite a draw, especially when this MG6 also throws in sporty handling, clever technology and an evocative badge. It's true that a mainstream marque alternative would feel more polished, but this improved MG's smarter looks and better cabin quality do now dilute some of the original model's budget brand feel. In short, what we have here is a decent step forward for MG Motor UK, and a car that we're finally happy to recommend for family folk buying on a budget and looking for ultimate value. The MG6 is unusual, a little different, and potentially something of a breath of fresh air in a market sector getting rather set in its ways. If the badge chimes with you and you're in search of something in the Focus or Astra segment that'll give you a little more for your money, then it's well worth a try.